Our next story from Grimm Fairy Tales is Little Brother and Little Sister. Little brother took little sister by the hand. "Listen," he whispered. "Since our mother died, we haven't been happy for a single hour. The stepmother beats us every day, and her one-eyed daughter kicks us away whenever we try and go near her. What's more, stale bread crusts are all we get to eat. The dog under the table eats better than we do. He often gets a tasty bit of meat. God knows if our mother were to see how we have to live. Let's go away together into the wide world. We couldn't live any worse if we were tramps." Little sister nodded, because every word her brother said was true. They waited until the stepmother was having a nap, and then they left the house, closing the door very quietly behind them. They walked the whole day over meadows and fields, over pasture land and stony land. It began to rain, and little sister said, "God's crying now, and our hearts are crying with him." In the evening they came to the forest. They were so exhausted, so hungry and sorrowful, and so frightened of the dark that was gathering around them, that all they could do was climb into a hollow tree and fall asleep. When they awoke in the morning, the sun was already shining down into their tree. Little brother said, "Sister, wake up. It's warm and sunny, and I'm thirsty, and I can hear a spring. Come, let's drink." Little sister woke up too, and hand in hand they went to search for the spring they could hear among the trees. Now, the trouble was that their stepmother was a witch. She could see through her eyelids, and she was watching the children all the time as they tiptoed out of the house. She crept after them as witches do, flattening herself close to the ground, and she put a spell on all the springs in the forest before creeping back to the house. Soon little brother and little sister found the spring they'd heard, saw the fresh cold water glistening as it ran over the stones. It looked so inviting that they both knelt down to drink. But little sister had learned how to listen to what the water was saying, and she could hear the spring talking. Just as little brother was raising his cupped hands to his dry mouth, she cried out, "Don't drink it! The spring is bewitched. Anyone who drinks from it will become a tiger. Put it down, put it down. You'll tear me to pieces." Little brother did as she said, thirsty as he was. They walked on and soon found another spring. This time she knelt first and put her head close to the water. "Not this one either," she said. "Whoever drinks from me will become a wolf. I think stepmother must have put a spell on it." "But I'm so thirsty," he said. "Well, if you become a wolf, you'll eat me up at once. I promise I won't." "Wolves don't remember promises. There must be a spring she hasn't bewitched. Let's keep looking." It was long before they found a third spring. This time little sister bent over and listened carefully, and heard the water say, "Whoever drinks me will be turned into a deer. Whoever drinks me will be turned into a deer." She turned to her brother, but it was too late. He was so thirsty that he had thrown himself full length and plunged his face into the water, and at once his face changed and lengthened and became covered in fine hair. His limbs changed into a deer's legs, and he stood up, tottering uncertainly, and there he was, a young deer, a fawn. Little sister saw him look around nervously, about to flee. She flung her arms around his neck. "Brother, it's me, your sister. Don't flee away, or we'll both be lost forever. Oh, what have you done, my poor brother? Oh, what have you done?" She wept, and the fawn wept too. Finally, little sister gathered herself and said, "Stop crying, my sweet little dear. I'll never leave you. Come on, let's make the best of this." She took off the golden garter that she wore and put it around the fawn's neck. Then she wove some rushes into a cord and tied it to the garter. Leading him along with her, she walked onwards and further, deeper into the forest. After they'd walked a long way, she came to a clearing, and in the clearing there was a little house. Little sister stopped and looked all around. It was very quiet. The garden was neatly kept, and the door of the house was open. "Is anyone home?" she called. There was no reply. She and the fawn went inside and found the neatest and cleanest little home they'd ever seen. Their stepmother, the witch, didn't care for housekeeping, and her house was always cold and dirty. But this one was delightful. "What we'll do," she said to the fawn, "is we'll look after this house really well. We'll keep it nice and clean for whoever it belongs to. Then they won't mind us staying here." She spoke to the fawn all the time. He understood her well enough and obeyed her when she said, "Don't eat the plants in the garden, and when you want to do pee-pee or the other thing, you go outside." She made him a bed on the hearth from soft moss and leaves. Every morning she went out and gathered food for herself, wild berries or nuts or sweet-tasting roots. There were carrots and beans and cabbages in the vegetable garden, and she always gathered plenty of fresh sweet grass for the deer, who ate it from her hand. He was happy to play around her, and in the evening, when little sister had washed and said a prayer, she lay down with her head on the deer's back for a pillow. If only little brother had still been human, their life would have been perfect. They lived like that for some time, but one day it happened that the king had a great hunt in the forest. The trees resounded with notes of the horn and the barking of dogs, the joyful shouts of the huntsmen. The fawn pricked up his ears and longed to be outside with the hunt. "Let me go with them, sister," he begged. "I'd give anything to join them in the hunt." He pleaded so passionately that she gave in. "But," she said as she opened the door, "make sure you come back by evening. I'm going to lock the door in case the wild huntsmen come by. So to let me know it's you, knock and say, 'Sister dear, your brother's here.' If you don't say that, I shan't open the door." The young deer was out through the door in a flash, bounding away into the trees. He had never felt so good, so happy, or so free as when the huntsmen saw him and started after him and failed to catch him. Whenever they came near and thought they'd surely caught him this time, he leapt away into the bushes and disappeared. When it was getting dark, he ran to the little house and knocked on the door. "Sister dear, your brother's here." Little sister opened the door and he trotted in happily and told her all about the hunt. He slept deeply all night. When morning came, he heard the distant music of the horn and the hounds once more, and he couldn't resist. "Sister, please open the door. I beg you. I must go and join in, or I'll die of longing." Unhappily, little sister opened the door and said, "Don't forget the password when you come back." He didn't reply, but bounded away towards the hunt. When the king and the huntsmen saw the deer with the golden collar, they gave chase at once. Through the brakes and briars, through thickets and across clearings, the little deer ran all day long, and he led the hunt on a wild chase. Several times they nearly caught him, and when the sun was setting, a shot from the gun wounded him in the leg. He couldn't run fast anymore, and one of the huntsmen managed to follow him home, saw him knock, and heard the words, "Sister dear, your brother's here." The huntsman saw the door open and the girl let in the deer and shut the door again. He went and told the king. "Is that so?" said the king. "Well, we shall hunt him all the harder tomorrow." Little sister was frightened when she saw that her deer was wounded. She washed the blood off his leg and bound a poultice of herbs to help it heal. In fact, the wound wasn't a serious one, and he woke up in the morning. The little deer had forgotten about the wound. He begged to go out a third time. "Sister, I cannot tell you the passion in my breast for the hunt. I must go and join in, or I shall go mad." Little sister began to weep. Yesterday they wounded you, she said, and today they'll kill you, and I'll be left all alone in the woods. Think of that. I'll have no one left. I can't let you out. I can't. Well, then I'll die here in front of you. When I hear the notes of the horn, I feel every atom of my body leaping with joy. My longing is too much for me, sister. I beg you, let me go. She couldn't resist his pleas, and with a heavy heart she unlocked the door. Without a backward glance, the deer leaped out and bounded away into the forest. The king had given orders to his huntsmen that they should do the deer with the golden collar no harm. If you see him, put your guns up and hold the hound back. 10 golden tailors to the man who sees him first. They hunted the deer through every part of the forest all day long, and finally, as the sun was setting, the king called the huntsman to him. Show me where the cottage is. If we can't catch him one way, we'll trap him another. What was the little rhyme, he said. The huntsman repeated it for him. When they reached the cottage, the king said, Sister dear, your brother's here. The door opened at once. The king walked in and found standing there a girl more beautiful than he had ever seen. She was frightened to see a man and not her dear little deer. But the king was wearing a golden crown, and he smiled kindly. He reached out his hand and took hers. Will you come to my palace with me, he said, and be my wife? Why, yes, said little sister, but my little dear must come too. I won't go without him. He can come by all means, said the king. He shall live as long as you do, and he shall want for nothing. As he said that, the deer himself came bounding in. Little sister caught his golden collar and tied the cord of rushes to it. The king lifted the girl onto his horse, and they went home to the palace, the deer proudly trotting behind his sister and the king. Soon afterwards the wedding was celebrated, and the little sister became queen. As for the little brother, the deer, he had a whole palace garden to play in, a team of servants to look after him, the groom of the grass, the valet of the horns and the hooves, the maid of the golden curry comb, whose job it was to groom him thoroughly every day before he went to bed, and deal with any ticks or fleas or lice he might have picked up. So they were all very happy. Now, all this time, the wicked stepmother had thought the brother and sister must have been torn to pieces by wild animals. But when she read in the paper that little sister had become queen, and that her constant companion was a deer, it didn't take her long to work out what had happened. That wretched boy must have drunk from the stream I put the deer magic on, she said to her daughter. It's not fair, said the daughter. I ought to be queen, not her. Shut your moaning, said the old woman. When the time comes, you'll get what you deserve. Time went past, and the queen gave birth to a child, a handsome little boy. The king was out hunting at the time. The witch and the daughter went to the palace disguised as chambermaids, managed to find their way to the queen's bedchamber. Now come, your majesty, the witch said to the queen, who was lying weak and exhausted in her bed. Your bath is ready. It will make you feel so much better. Come with us. They carried her to the bathroom and put her in the tub. Then they lit a fire underneath it, such a great fire that the queen suffocated from the smoke. To hide their crime, they closed the wall up by magic where the door had been, and hung a tapestry over it. Now you get into bed, the witch said to her daughter when the little girl clambered in. The old woman put a spell on her so she looked like the queen. The one thing she couldn't do anything about was the missing eye. Lie with that side of your head on the pillow, she said, and if anyone speaks to you, just mumble. When the king came home the evening and heard he had a little son, he was delighted. He went to his dear wife's bedchamber and was about to open the curtains to see how she was, but the false chambermaid said, Don't, your majesty, don't open the curtains on any account. She needs rest and mustn't be disturbed. The king tiptoed away, and he didn't discover that a false queen lay lying in the bed. That night the deer wouldn't sleep in his stable. He climbed the stairs to the nursery where the baby lay and refused to leave it. He had to do so without explaining, for since the death of the queen he had lost the power to speak, so he lay down beside the cradle and went to sleep. At midnight, the nurse who slept there woke suddenly to see the queen come into the nursery, and she seemed to be wet from head to foot, as if she'd just come from the bath. She bent over the cradle, kissed the baby, and stroked the deer, and said, "How is my child? How is my dear? I'll come twice more, then I must disappear." And she went out without another word. The nurse was too frightened to tell anyone. She thought the queen was still lying in bed, recovering from childbirth. The next night the same thing happened, except this time the queen seemed to be covered in little flames and said, "How is my child? How is my dear? I'll come once more, then I must disappear." The nurse thought she should tell the king, so the next night he waited in the nursery with her. When midnight struck once again, the queen came into the room. This time she was covered in thick black smoke. The king cried, "What's this?" The queen ignored him, but went to the child and the deer, as she'd said before. "How is my child? How is my dear? I've come for the last time. I must disappear." The king tried to embrace her, but she faded into smoke and drifted out of his arms and mingled with the air. The deer tugged the king's sleeve and pulled him to the place with the tapestry hung. Then he tugged the tapestry down and butted the wall with his little horns. The king understood and ordered his servants to knock the wall down. In all the disturbance, the false queen got out of bed without anyone noticing and tiptoed away. When the wall was down, they discovered the bathroom all blackened with soot, and the queen's body lying clean and pale and fresh in the bath. "Oh," the king cried, "my wife, my dear wife," and bent to embrace her body, and by the grace of God she came alive again. She told him about the dreadful crime that had been committed, and the king sent his swiftest messenger to the palace gate, just in time to tell the watchman to arrest the witch and her daughter as they tried to creep out. The two of them were brought before court. Judgment was pronounced. The daughter was to be led into the woods where the wild beasts would eat her, and the witch was to be burned. And as soon as the old woman was reduced to ashes, the spell lost its power over the deer, and he was transformed into little brother, human again, and he and little sister lived happily together for the rest of their lives. The